Good morning, everybody. All right. So I'm going to start and get things rolling here. Welcome uh, to this presentation sponsored by the Books and Beyond Project at IU. My name is Beth Samuelson. I'm a faculty director. I've been involved with the project since 2008. Our current activity is the Multilingual Minds Network. Um, Part of our vision is to find ways to support the Sustainable Development Goal 4 pertaining to education, to give help to provide more access to literacy for speakers of minoritized languages around the world. Specifically, that goal means we've identified the goal of supporting creators of stories to create storybooks, support heritage languages, amplify community voices. We welcome anybody who wants to be a part of what we're doing. We have an email list that's on the screen here that you can sign up to if you're interested in being a part of what we do. At this time, we are currently funded by the Community Engaged Alliance here in Indiana to work with Yoruba and Burmese communities. Um, So now I'm going to invite Nazia Masood. She's a foreign language teaching assistant here at IU. She's teaching um, Bangla, and she's going to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Tom McConnell.
Thank you so much, Professor Beth Samuelson, for giving me the opportunity to introduce Dr. McConnell in today's presentation. So, Dr. McConnell is a professor of science education in the Department of Biology at Ball State University. Before moving to the university, he taught high school biology for 14 years. His teaching has included science teaching methods courses for all grades, biology courses, and the transdisciplinary immersive learning project called Conversation Tales that you will learn more about this morning. He has also led a variety of teacher professional development programs across Indiana. He is the owner of Airway Publishing, and he is also the managing editor for two journals, the Hoosier Science Teacher and the Global Journal for Transformative Education. He joins us today from San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he is currently teaching in a semester-long study abroad program. Please join me in welcoming Dr. McConnell.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction. And I'm really happy to be here with you. I'm going to switch over to my slides, and if you can let me know if it's visible, that would help. Is it showing?
Perfect.
Good deal. Okay. Um, First of all, I want to thank Dr. Samuelson for inviting me and for all of you for joining. What your organization is doing fits very well with much of the work I'm trying to do right now in the later years in my career, and hopefully even after I retire, I hope to continue doing this type of work. It's very rewarding, and I think it's an important topic. Um, and what I'm going to be sharing with you is some of the background that led to the chapter that many of you have read, The Importance of Becoming Content Creators, from a book that was published. I'm one of the co-editors of the book, um, The Role of Transformative Education for Sustainable Social and Economic Development of Africa. And this was produced after a conference by an organization I'll mention today in Ghana, where we gathered several different people from almost all parts of the world and had presentations that led to some papers, and we selected several of those that were submitted to be chapters in this book to talk about issues related to how we transform education, specifically looking at Africa, but more or less looking at the entire global South as an area of both need and the desire to be making some changes. I think the need is happening all around the world. Some places are more open to it than others, and I think the global South is really productive in this work right now. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. To give you an idea of my position, Nazia mentioned I'm a science teacher educator. Most of my students are education majors. This semester, I'm actually teaching all biology courses in the study abroad program. So I get the pleasure of getting back into the science content that I love so much. And I have a very strong personal interest in incorporating environmental education into what I do. So much of the work that I'm going to be talking about relates to wildlife conservation and environmental conservation. That's the content that I often work with. I also have been writing a lot articles and some books about how do we change how we teach. And to me, these two intersect with some international projects that I've been involved with. Both teacher professional development that I've done, where I'm bringing teachers, for instance, to the Indianapolis Zoo and trying to get them to see here's how we do a better job of structuring learning that reaches students on a more personal level. So it's transforming the learners, and also producing content for science teachers. And Nazia mentioned the Conservation Tales book series. It's a project that lasted 7 years and incorporated students and a colleague in the faculty. We'll talk more about that a little bit, to produce books for children to help teach them about conservation, that as the project progressed, it just naturally became bilingual. And we've got some international colleagues throughout the project who help with content. And then in the more recent ones, helping to translate them for use in other countries. I'm also the creator of a project called the STRIDES project. It stands for the Science Technology Resources Integrated Design Studio, and it's intended to share and produce free resources in digital formats to help teach science as well. So all of these I look at as the same picture of creating content for teachers and students and parents and homeschoolers and informal educators to use in either book format or video or online web activities, a whole variety or a whole suite of different media. And those projects, in some cases, overlap and spin off into each other. So it's kind of hard for me to separate how those work. And part of the reason why I've gotten interested in creating books for more international audiences has come from the first international conference I went to in Kenya in 2018. One of the keynote speakers is a colleague of mine from Ball State University. Her name is Winnie Muchera. She grew up in Kenya, came to the US to do her master's program. And it was the opening address of the conference, and it completely changed my thinking about what I'm doing as a content creator. She was talking about when she learned to read. So I'd like you to stop and think for a minute. Finish the statement. A is for, think about when you were learning to read. Okay. Most of you probably said A is for apple. Okay. She asked this question in that session, and I thought, okay, A is for apple. And then she explained to me that when she was growing up in Kenya, this was one of the books they used. A is for apple. She didn't see an apple until she came to the US as a master's student. And she's wondering now later in life why apple was what was chosen. Where she grew up in Kenya, when we walked around her neighborhood where she grew up, there's avocado trees along the street. Why not A is for avocado? Something that's culturally relevant for the student. And quite frankly, as we started talking about why is it A is for apple in places where they don't grow apples, I started realizing that I'm part of a system that creates the problem. So that's where my journey on this path started. And it comes down to who controls what's being produced to use in schools to teach students how to read, about social studies, about math and science. The A is for Apple book is something produced in North America. There are similar reading books for kids taught in Africa that are produced in England and in other parts of Europe. Apples are a common thing. We teach our kids A is for apple, and it's a culturally relevant example that we can use in some locations. But when we assume that we're going to use that to teach children to read in other places, it's carrying another message. And it's not a message that I want to support. It's the message that the culture that matters is not yours, it's ours. And I started thinking about how can I take what I'm doing and try to break that. I don't want to be part of what I described in our chapter as I cited a source talking about the mission to civilize other people. And as it turns out, those people probably didn't need that kind of civilization. It's less about civilization than it is about creating a hierarchy between which culture and who the political power should be, and then using that to enforce a structure for workforce development where, okay, if you're from this country, you're going to be a laborer. If you need highly trained professionals and technology people, they either have to go to school somewhere else or we're going to bring them from another country. Europe and North America did this all over the world. China is actively involved in doing this in some places now. Um, there are other places that have colonized and tried to impose our educational system on other people. Like I said, that makes me a little uncomfortable. So I've started looking at how can we change that? How can we use educational materials in schools around the world in whatever location we're talking about that helps meet the specific needs of the community, helps preserve local cultures, and help support the aspirations of individuals in that place. And sometimes that means a different set of materials written in different languages with different examples and different purposes, because I found out what schools in Kenya need is very different than what schools in Indiana need, and it's very different than schools where I am now in Puerto Rico. Every place has their own local needs. And we've got to stop and think about, okay, if that's a local need there, who understands that need well enough to say these are the materials we need and who can produce those materials effectively? And that's what this idea of becoming a content creator is about in my mind. Um, there's certainly a need for content creators. When I first saw this discussion happening in front of me in 2018, there was just beginning a trend for a lot of authors and a lot of organizations in Africa to start producing their own textbooks. And I'd say it probably is more prominent in South Africa than it is in some places. Um, but a lot of the books and a lot of the educational resources being produced for schools in Africa, they present themselves as books for Africa. But if you look on these pictures, if you start finding the authors' names, um, this one over on the far right, Social Studies Activity Book Africa, written by somebody that I believe is in Missouri here in the US, or not, well, here in the US. Okay, we've got authors that I'm pretty sure their names are not from Africa. Maybe I'm wrong, but so the companies that do this work, the publishing companies and the authors who write these, are trying to reach an African audience more effectively. But I would argue that in order to do that really well, we need to have authors, illustrators, photographers, publishers, educational designers in Africa creating books for Africa, and in Latin America for Latin American schools, and in Europe for European schools, and North Americans for North American schools. And right now, the technology is so much more accessible to allow that to happen than it was when I first started working on writing um, in about 2006. Right? It was difficult for people in other locations to do that because the big publishing houses that controlled the entire market are all based in Europe and North America. Okay, so there we might be perpetuating the problem when we're trying to solve it. So that means we need to think about who is going to be the content creator. Um, My first time deciding I was truly the content creator and controlling the entire picture was in about 2015, writing books that had nothing to do with education. I wrote some music books and I thought, I'm going to do it my way. And I found it was really rewarding to have control of the visual appearance, the content, how the book is organized. And I decided that to do that, I need to become a self-publisher. Right. By doing that, I could set the priorities of what do I want to teach in this book. I get to influence the pedagogy. How do I want it to be taught? I get to show the local context that I think is appropriate, and I get to do it in the language that I choose. And I will tell you, for me to choose a language is a little hard. I am, I would say, in probably a second year Spanish student level of fluency, just working on learning Spanish. I'm teaching here in Puerto Rico, but I do not speak the language well. But I have found that for me, it's not that hard for me to ask for help. And so if I can get collaborators to help with that part, I've got more control over it. In my first books about wildlife, I decided that I wanted to make sure animals are shown realistically, not anthropomorphized. And I had a lot of my colleagues that I worked with at the university tell me, oh, you shouldn't do it this way. You should, in your giraffe book, show two giraffes talking with each other. It's like, that's not what giraffes do. I'm trying to write an accurate depiction of giraffes in the wild. I want to show the real thing. So I set that advice aside. And then they said, oh, no, you should submit this to a book company and have the editors work on this. I had done books that way. And I found that I submit the book and the editors design the cover. The editors choose the artwork. The editors change my titles. And if I want to have more control over it, I need to become the content creator on multiple different levels. And at first it was a little intimidating, but I've done it now. Last count, I was at 32 books that I have been the director, author, publisher, designer. I bring in team members to help with tasks, but by being the content creator, I now have control over how we do this. Okay. And that's what I'm hoping in our discussion we can talk about. How do you get started on that path? How do you make it happen? Okay. One of the things that helps with this right now, self-publishing is easier than ever. There are many companies that offer what we call on-demand publishing. For some of my books that I publish, and I'm going to hold up one of them in front of the camera just as an example. It's a little blurry on the camera. Well, we'll show some images. My Conservation Tales books, I publish this way because I talked to publishing houses and said, if I publish the book and have you print them, how much is it going to cost? And they said, oh, it's not expensive. It's only $2 or $3 a book. And by the way, you have a 500 or 1,000 book minimum. So all of a sudden, I've got this overhead, and I would end up with boxes and boxes and boxes of books that I have to figure out where am I going to sell them. And it puts the burden on me to do the marketing and the shipping and all the work. The on-demand publishing services I use, I've got one book through a company called Lulu.com. The one I'm using right now is KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing. It's owned by Amazon, which is not my favorite place to be, but it gives me some advantages. I do not have to have books in stock. I create them. They say, here's how much it costs to print a copy. Then I set the price. And they say, okay, we take this cut, you get this back in royalties. And when somebody orders a book, Amazon prints it, they bind it, they package it, they ship it, they take the payment, they send me the royalties. The overhead cost of running my business is almost zero. My earnings from it are smaller, but if I want to buy copies of the book for my stock that I can sell at a conference or from my home, I can buy them at cost for printing and I can turn around and sell those. And again, it's a way to reduce the cost and reduce the requirement to have enormous stock of books. And that last part, not having to order 500 books in your first run and not know if they're ever going to sell, that takes a lot of pressure off of me as an author and publisher. To do that, I also had to start my own company. Um, I knew I was going to produce multiple books. And if you produce books, you really need to have something called an ISBN number. You've all seen this on the books. Those are sold through a company called Bowker that I can go and order individual ISBN numbers that I can assign to a book. And then I enter into their database the name, the author, the everything about it. But if I'm doing multiple books, I want to buy a chunk of ISBN numbers. And to do that and get a cheaper rate, I had to basically create a company. Airway Publishing is my company. I tried doing McConnell Publishing and found out somebody else already had the name. And I searched several names, and it turns out that's my street that I live on. And it works out that that's my publishing company. I don't have a big stock of books. I don't keep an inventory, but it allows me to own those ISBN numbers, which means the copyright is held by me. I can also ask KDP, okay, you assign an ISBN number, and then the copyright belongs to them. And they have the control over where is it going to be sold, what's the price. And again, I didn't want to give up that control. As potential content creators, if you're working on books for a school in a particular context, you probably want to have the control over that. So being able to buy an ISBN and control your own copyright is nice. Okay. I've also developed some open access digital books, mostly for science lab books that I'm doing, but I am exploring other options to do that. Kindle Direct Publishing does have the option that I could publish my books as an ebook, which would make them really inexpensive for production and really inexpensive for consumers to buy them. And I haven't chosen to go that direction yet because my collaboration very quickly became working with artists, and we wanted to do things in a print format. I'm old school. I'm pretty sure I'm the oldest person in this room, and I still like hard copy books. And I like digital materials, but I like the hard copies, so I'm a little partial to that. At the same time, as Conservation Tales started to come to a close, I've started exploring producing digital videos as a teaching tool, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So there's multiple formats that you can do this in, multiple venues for sharing them. And then the task is, how do we get a team of people with a skill set? And my first shot, I thought, I'm going to do this myself. Our first book was about a bird that lives very close to IU. In fact, I spent some time in Bloomington shadowing some researchers studying cerulean warblers in Yellowwood State Forest. That became our first book, and I'm taking pictures and I'm outlining the story. I had characters in mind, and I started to draw my illustrations and realized I can't do that. I thought I could draw. I'm not an artist. So I found out I had the written and oral communication skills. I knew how to use technology to put the words on a page, but I didn't have artistic skills. So I sent an email to my colleagues in the School of Art here at Ball State and said, hey, I'm looking for a student to illustrate a book about birds. Do you know anybody? And within about 3 hours, I had an email from a professor. I've got just the student. Oh, here's 2 students. Talk to these students. Let's bring them on. I interviewed them. I saw some samples of their work. And all of a sudden, I had a team, including the art professor who was going to supervise the artists. We now had 4 people working on a book. So now I had to figure out, how do we do the collaboration skills? How do we say, okay, here's what the goal of the project is. How do we manage it? How do we build a sense of teamwork? And over the next 7 years, this evolved into something that almost took over my life in a very good way. It became a self-driving project that was rich and diverse, and I'm I'm disappointed that it's not still happening, but we'll talk more about that. And then I also had to learn marketing skills. Educational skills, I'm an education professor. I could identify the nerds' needs and learning goals and talk about how do we design learning materials, but I was teaching that to a lot of artists, photographers, graphic designers, beginning teachers, biologists. So there's a lot of learning that happened within the team. The pictures on this screen show some of those team members bringing their skills. Photographers on the lower left, a whole team meeting around the table to collaborate and design a book they wrote about corals. The illustrators doing sketches, graphic designers creating promotional materials. And I found that I was learning more from my students than they were learning from me. So when you build this team, try to get the people with the skills you need and then learn from that. It's actually a really exciting way to do this. Okay. And then this evolved. I'm going to show you a little bit about the Conservation Tales book project, talk a little bit about strides, talk a little bit about digital storytelling, and then stop talking and let us have a conversation. Okay. That's my plan at this point. So these are the three content creation projects that I have going on an ongoing basis. The Conservation Tales project started as, like I said, 2 students and 2 professors. We did it as independent study. And as it grew, we said, oh, I need to add a graphic design student. Here's one. Let's bring this person in. Hey, we need another illustrator. Oh, let's bring in a photographer. I need somebody to help write stories. And it grew into a collaboration where each semester we were producing 2 books. We would do this every spring semester. My job was to find scientists that were interested in collaborating with us, connect our student team with those scientists, and have the students say, okay, we're going to write a story about a child that meets a bat and learns from bat researchers about bats and bat conservation. And we incorporated learning activities and conservation action plans into the books. Over the 7-year project, we produced 25 books on 17 different, or actually it's 19 different books with different species covered. 6 of those reimagine the same topic for different audiences. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Some of them for preschool students, some of them in different languages. We produced a large number of educational activities. We've produced some videos and even a planetarium show that came from our coral reef project. Our students shot 360 video in the Florida Keys underwater, and 2 of the students teamed up the next semester as their own independent capstone projects for their majors, and they produced a planetarium show. I can't believe it happened. It was so cool. I've also had 2 of the students that were on our teams for more than 1 semester decide that their senior honors thesis project was going to be producing a book completely on their own. So the 2 books over here on the right, Conserving Nature, Blanding's Turtle Journey. This young lady worked with me for 4 semesters, helped write 4 of our books, and added some illustrations and said, I want to write my own book, and I want it to be about an endangered turtle in my neighborhood. She did the writing, the photography, the illustration, the graphic design, the marketing, did the whole thing. It turned out beautifully. Another student who came and worked with me for 2 semesters as a writer, added a little bit of illustration, and she helped translate a couple books into Spanish, decided she wanted to write one of J is for Jane is about it's the A to Z children's book highlighting women in conservation science. She now works as a wildlife conservation scientist, and she said, let's come up with 1 woman scientist for each letter in the alphabet. And again, did the entire book on her own. My only contribution for that is that I told them, you need an ISBN number. I will sell you one really, really cheap for Airway Publishing. It's published by my company, but they have complete control over the book. Okay. So that's where that came from. In the latter years, we now have 6 of the books that have been translated into Spanish. The first ones that we did, Monarch Butterflies, Actually, monarch butterfly, sloth, and macaws were the first ones we translated into Spanish. We deliberately recruited students who could translate a book into Spanish, either had a Spanish minor or a Spanish major or were native speakers, because these books have partners that we paired with from Mexico and Costa Rica. One of them, our sloth researcher, said, I will partner with you on one condition. I want a version in Spanish for schools in Costa Rica. And we said, we just happen to have a student we just recruited a week ago who's going to translate this into Spanish, and we need your help. So macaws and sloths, guacamayas and perezosos are the two names. Guacamayas is the word for a specific type of macaw. Perezosos, I don't like that name for sloths. It means lazy. Sloths aren't lazy. They're also not always slow, but that's it. Those are in Costa Rican Spanish. The Mariposas monarchas is in Mexican Spanish. The illustrator who did the characters, her mother is from Mexico, in the region where monarch butterflies live. She said, I really want to illustrate for the monarch book, and she helped us translate that along with another student. The coral books shown on here and the manatee book, those were translated by a professor I met at a conference a year and a half ago here in Puerto Rico. And she teaches deaf education for students here in Puerto Rico. She was the moderator of a session where we presented the choral books, and she came up to my collaborator and I and said, I love these books. I love that there's pictures that go with the text. And my students need that to help teach them to read, because there are very few books in Spanish that have illustrations and text for that grade level. Is this in Spanish? Well, we had started translating them. And then the semester ended. We weren't done. The students graduated. And I need help. Will you translate them? She has translated them into Puerto Rican Spanish. I also sent her a book on manatees that I wanted in Spanish and said, can you help with this? Because there are manatees here in Puerto Rico. After I arrived here in Puerto Rico in early January, I received a package with the first final copies. She wants to do research on how well those help do deaf education in Spanish. So it's like meeting two different linguistic needs at once. I had never dreamt of it. But by being open to saying we have control of the book, we can do with it what we want, it opens up those possibilities. I also have books on sea turtles and seahorses that I brought here. And sometime in March, I'm planning to go meet with some sea turtle researchers and ask them, please, will you translate this into Spanish for me? So I don't need to be the expert. I need colleagues who are experts. Okay? The Strides Project began when we started talking about the end of Conservation Tales. Our grant was running out. My collaborator retired. I thought, what do I do next? And we started talking about moving things digital. This is a clearinghouse where we put lessons that we wrote for Conservation Tales, including some that have websites and videos. The videos we created are in here. And it quickly turned into a spinoff where one of my colleagues in my department does research on how fish learn while they are still in the embryonic stage in an egg to detect and avoid predators. She got a big NSF grant. NSF said, you need to have a broader impact component. She said, would you create educational materials about our project for middle school kids? Fish Go to School is one of two lessons that we've published digitally that incorporate video as ways to help teach students how to do science like the scientists do. It's not so much teaching about how fish learn, it's how to be a scientist. And that's what NSF wanted. So we'll talk about those as we go along. Those are housed in the Strides project. It's nothing more than a website to provide this to educators for free. One of my goals is I want to make as much of what I have available for free, because teachers, especially in other countries, don't have money to purchase materials. If I can get that stuff to those students, I'm making a difference in a good way. So this has included some lesson plans that are about corals. Some of these, like I said, are web pages. Some of them are downloadable files. We are in the process of adding a new part to this where one of my colleagues who's teaching plant taxonomy, he wants his students to do projects and they're kind of bored with it. And I said, what if they make it for a public audience? A colleague I saw at a presentation in South Africa is doing that, and it seems to motivate the students to do better quality work. So we're going to try that, share their lessons about different groups of plant taxa. I also produced an article published in the Hoosier Science Teacher before the eclipse that happened not too long ago about how do you view a solar eclipse safely. The idea of doing a journal article that is video based, it was, hey, we could do this. It's an online journal. All we have to have is a link in a PDF file. Let's try it, see if it works. So it's very experimental. If I had to do it over again, I would probably do the video differently, but it's part of learning how to be the content creator. So beyond books, I'm trying to get into more technology-based information. This idea comes from somebody who came and spoke at my teacher workshop at the zoo. Her name is Kelly Greasy. She's the communication director for a group called the Global Center for Species Survival. It's an international organization whose office is in the Indianapolis Zoo. If you've ever been there, you go in the new entrance, you go through the garden, you go into a building, you walk right past their office and can see in their window. And sometimes you will see Kelly sitting in a little studio interviewing and videotaping somebody. She produces podcasts and social media posts. She used to be an award-winning TV news producer in Indianapolis, and I think in St. Louis is where she said she worked previously. And she talked to our teachers about the idea that our students don't choose to read. How many of you have experienced that? You try, here's the reading assignment. Nobody reads that. If you ask them, go look up information, and actually, if I do this for you, if I told you, go look up information about a Puerto Rican parrot, what's your first go-to source? Feel free to open your mic and answer the question if you like. Or maybe in chat.
The kids will go to YouTube, I think.
YouTube, Google. Okay. And I thought, I don't want to teach my students to do this. And the day after her presentation I had to go prune a branch from a tree in my yard. And the chain on my little pruning saw was loose. And I need to tighten it up. And I'm not sure how to do that. I only had this piece of equipment for about 2 months. So I had to figure out how to do that. And I'm standing in the shed. On the shelf there is the instructor manual. I pulled out my phone and looked it up in YouTube. I thought, okay, I'm doing what my students are doing. So if we want to engage students to get them interested in enough in a topic to read more, she's suggesting that we need to do digital storytelling. A social media post of no more than 30 seconds. A YouTube video, no more than 3 to 5 minutes, maybe a longer video of 8 or 10 minutes. Short, video-based, easily found on a search engine resources. That's what I'm calling digital storytelling. So we'll talk about this in just a moment as well. Okay. This is a new literacy. I'm still not real sure I like it, but it is a reality. I did surveys with my students. My older students answered the way they wanted me. They thought I wanted them to answer. I said, what is your favorite go-to source if you need to look something up? Oh, I go online and look in the journals. No, you don't. I've seen you. You grab your phone and you Google it. Okay. My younger students, oh yeah, we use our phones. We don't use our laptops. We use our phones. We look up things on social media. And when I travel to other countries, this is ubiquitous. In Kenya, they have better cell phone service everywhere in the country than I have right here in Puerto Rico, where I'm at now and where I'm teaching, and better than what I have in Indiana. And they use their phones for everything. That's a source that we can take advantage of to produce educational content that our students choose to use. Okay. So that's one of the weird approaches that I'm trying to get into. Right now, here in Puerto Rico, I'm using GoPro cameras, a little digital camera. I am hoping by the time I go back to Indiana in mid-May, I will have video footage, including some 360 cameras, to have the students that are helping me here now create short video stories. I actually have a meeting on Monday with a professor who does research in El Yunque National Forest, the only rainforest here in Puerto Rico. Our students are going to go shoot video and interview their students in Spanish. The students helping me are advanced Spanish students. They're going to do this as a project. And one of them happens to be a media major who's going to help produce some short videos. Another one is an emerging media major who's going to help put them into social media type of formats. The goal is to produce a handful of videos about wildlife conservation here in Puerto Rico in Spanish for a Spanish-speaking audience. I don't know if that makes me like the Bad Bunny of wildlife conservation right now, but I'm kind of slipping into that area. Okay. And with these, all you need is a camera. Your cell phone works. Video editing apps like iMovie, or one that you can access for free that's really easy to use to do social media, called Adobe Express. I mean, really easy to use. And if you make something on there, you tell it publish, it saves it on a website, gives you a link that you can share, and it's public. So Adobe, Instagram, YouTube. I didn't put X on here. I've escaped that area. I was posting things there, but social media is the new place where you can publish information. There's a little bit new things to learn about. How do you credit sources? How do you make sure what you're doing is high quality and accurate? When you become the content creator, you are legally responsible for those things now. So you have to understand what is the copyright law. And in some countries, copyright law is really, really loose. I like to be pretty strict with what I do because I don't need any legal issues. Our bat book that I wrote, I found a picture that was in a site called Flickr that you can use things for free under creative content licenses. We published the book. A few months later, I got an email from the photographer who took one of the pictures. You've got my photograph in your book. It's copyrighted. You did not ask permission to use this. You found it on some other site, but they stole it from me, and now you're using it. I'm like, oh no, I've got a problem. So I said, what can I do to make this right? He said, change how you've got it credited in the book and send me 2 copies of the book and we'll call it good. Yes, I got books now in Israel. So it all works, but you have to be careful about what you're doing. So I've had to teach all the students and any collaborators I work with, what do we need to do for copyright issues? Okay. Digital storytelling for me has taken a couple different forms. The video in the upper left, this is actually a screenshot from a video produced by my students using the 360 camera. The same video was used then in the planetarium show. Some of these others are interviews with scientists that became part of lesson plans that we've written, photos that we took during the eclipse that are in that article that I've written. The one in the middle is actually my conservation students doing a science lab that I was trying to explain to them what happens to make oceans more acidic as carbon dioxide levels rose. I didn't tell them to do this, but they videotaped it on their phone. By the time I left the classroom at the end of the day, it had been posted on YouTube with voiceovers that they created. You know, they're all giggling. They run off to the other room. They do voiceovers of it. They produced it completely on their own in about 20 minutes and then showed me how to do it. So again, I don't have to be the expert. I have to have students that will show me how to do these things. They are digital natives. They do this for fun. They had fun doing it. They all laugh and giggle every time we show the video. I used this video in a biology class I taught Thursday of last week because we did this activity. So it is real content. Okay. So what I want to do is open this up to you for some questions. I have on this slide my email address. I've also got the website for the Strides Project if you ever want to go there and look, and for conservationtales.com. But I'm going to stop talking and sit back and let you guys ask some questions.
Go ahead and jump in, Comfort.
Thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. I actually noted a lot of things from it, and starting from your experience, which actually brought about this project of a thing. When you mentioned it that our culture has a lot of impact on what we write, and he asks us the question about A is for what. That takes me back to my own experience, because in my geography test, because I did geography in my high school, we were taught longer days, shorter nights, which I never experienced that in Nigeria. But getting to America, I saw it. And I was like, why are they teaching us this when we don't even experience it in our own culture? So it's a wonderful one. And my question is this. When it comes to copyright, you made mention of copyright, and you said you use so many students in doing that. In your book, I want to ask, the books that you've published, did you actually acknowledge them as being part of the project, or is there another way around it?
We do acknowledge them. At the
Okay,
back
thank
of
you.
our book, we have a section where we show the team members, a little profile of them. If one of them took a photograph, we credit them as owner of the photograph. I actually produce a contract that I give to the students that say the artwork they produce, the photographs they produce, they own the copyright to that. I get exclusive rights to use it in anything, or I get non-exclusive rights to use it in anything I want for our project. So web pages, lesson plans, the books, videos, but they own it. They can reuse it for another purpose. They can profit from it if they want. So I cite them. I teach them how to cite other sources and how to make sure we have the legal right to do that. Sometimes we've had to write to authors and say, will you give us permission to use it? So some of our things are listed as with permission or Creative Commons license that we prefer to use because it's easier. We also do that in some of our illustrations. We cite who did the illustration. I've got some of my writers that had some writing skills, and they would sketch. We give everybody a sketchbook and some art tools, and some of them wrote some. One young lady, she now is a third grade teacher. She worked on a book about sea turtles. She was drawing a jellyfish when we were at an aquarium in Florida, and she's coloring it in with her watercolor pencils and learning from our art students how to do that. And the artist all said, "Oh, this is really good." And he said, "Oh, I'm not an artist. This is not very good. It's in the book," and she's credited as the artist. So yes, we make sure we do that. We also make sure that the students get a certain number of copies of the books for free because it belongs to them as well. And then we also do the same thing with our consultants, the scientists. We make sure they are credited, cited, give them copies. It has become a really important overarching theme that everybody who gets on this is credited. On our website, if you go there, there's a page that has profile for every student who's ever worked on our team, and a couple of teachers who all they did was review it and give us feedback. That's an important role as well.
We have an issue related to the Books and Beyond project. So there are 12 volumes of stories that were written by students in Rwanda, students in the United States. And I just spoke to the copyright librarian here about what rights we would have to make some of those digital and put them on like the African storybook in English in Kinyarwanda. So the process was that, and I wasn't really involved in making these decisions or executing them at the time because I was just a faculty mentor. I wasn't really directing the project. The copyright permission from the Rwandan school was done through the Parents Association, not through the individuals who were minors, right?
Right.
That everybody received credit. Like everybody's credited in the books, but the copyright belongs to IU Books and Beyond Project here at IU. Um, so it's kind of naughty, right? I mean, we can identify individual stories and go back and try to identify individuals. But these young people are young adults now. We could go to the Parents Association and ask for kind of blanket permission to convert these stories into something that would be it'd have to be Creative Commons and not
Yeah,
no commercial applications, right? Like nobody's making any money off of this. We're
right.
trying to make sure that these stories have a broader scope. So yeah, it can get really naughty. It's one of the reasons why the stories have not had a wider range. And I've only like I'm kind of the archivist for the project, and I can't find copyright
Yeah,
signatures. Like nobody collected signatures except for a few years
yeah.
here in the States, right?
For any of you thinking about producing things, that's an issue to think about at the beginning of the project and have consent forms. I have consent forms for conservation tales and I've used it for other projects where anytime I have a picture of a minor, unless it's in one of those public spaces where it's considered fair use, I can take picture like a picture at a festival and I can use that. If it's a classroom setting, I have to get consent from the student and from a parent or guardian. Or I have to try to get pictures where I might see the back of a head or maybe their hands working on something. You have to be careful with working with minors. And anytime I use something that's from somebody else, I have a consent form, usually on a phone and my laptop, so that if I need a digital copy, I can say, "Hello, can I email this to you? Would you send it, sign it, send it back?" And I have a OneDrive folder full of nothing but consent forms. Once you get them, you have to keep them. So um, I've not had any issues, but yeah, it's one of those you better think about it early.
Yeah. Umida.
Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful, informative, and transformational presentation. So I work with a lot of heritage language teachers, and I noticed that in many diaspora communities, sometimes face is a primary driver, and we kind of ignore scientific language in their classrooms. And my question is, how can we guide teachers to see scientific inquiry not as a threat to tradition, but as a language of opportunity that will allow a heritage community to lead in modern global societies or industries?
Okay. Yeah, that can be an
Thank you.
issue. The places that I have worked, it has not been an issue because they would come to me and say, "Hey, we want to learn to do science. Can you help us?" But I know in some communities it is a barrier. The books that we wrote for kids, I had biology majors and teaching majors that helped write the story, and I would have to take their text and say, "You're using too much science jargon. Let's write this in common, ordinary language that any third grader can hear, get the concept, and then introduce a term." That helps. So you can talk about science using non-scientific language. But the whole purpose of our books is I want to show here's a student who's curious about an animal. They happen to meet a scientist to learn how do scientists do their job. And by the end, we always slip into the story, this student saying something about, "Wow, if I can learn to do science, I can do this job." And I try to show that all they really need to know is how to ask questions, how to collect evidence, how to make sense of it, how to explain their results. So if they can do that, they can be a scientist. Once you got that curiosity, then you can start teaching some more of the technical language that by that time it'll make more sense to them. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, yes. Students are
Okay.
interested, but sometimes parents or teachers say, "Oh, we
Yeah.
want our children to know more about culture or
Yep.
religion rather than, scientific language because they can learn it in schools."
I was
But
going
they're
if
missing
I
linguistics part.
If I had the elephant book, I would show you that because
Mm-hmm.
that one talks about a family in Kenya and talking about their local culture and some of the issues they have with elephants. Our sloth book, we do something similar where the family in Costa Rica is talking about, well, why are the trees and the sloths important to their indigenous culture? And trying to show them in their context, sitting around the in their home having a family meal, extended family that is important in that culture. So we try to slip in the cultural aspects, and we go out of our way with our books. We went out of our way with our books to show a really diverse group of characters, the scientists and the kids and their families. One of our children is in a wheelchair. We've got a child who's adopted, a child who's hearing impaired, people who live in villages in, like, say, Costa Rica and in Kenya, trying to show that what we do is relevant within the culture. So,
One of the things that I frequently say to parents is so we want our children to be confident and proficient readers. They need, if you help them identify something that they're interested in, it might be sloths, right? Like the gateway book would be your book, Tom, right? Where they read that and they say, "Oh, I'm just so interested in this. I want to learn more." Okay. And sometimes children need some facilitation to help them define those things, maybe in a physical library, a digital library, a bookstore, magazines and online content, right? But that deep dive into a topic that really interests them can help to develop their language skills overall. So it's very beneficial. The rub is, of course, where's the content, right? Like if you're an English speaker, you're fortunate to have access to quite a lot. Like when I was a kid, I was interested in cryptography, okay? And I couldn't find enough to satisfy myself, but there was stuff available. So like how many books are available or how many resources, let's say titles, like we just call them titles, how many juvenile titles are available in Spanish on sloths? So I see Jean has her hand up.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
Hey, thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate it. So interesting. I was wondering if you could tell me what kind of business you chose to use for your business. You said you needed one for the ISBNs, and then I didn't catch where you buy your ISBNs from.
My business is an individual LLC. It is incorporated, so I had to go through the incorporation process with the state and federal government, and I've got an employer identification number, and I have to send in a report every year about our monthly board meetings, and I have a board. I used to have two people that were part of my company, me and my dog. She's no longer alive. She was my office manager, but I have to submit reports, and I do all of that. But I'm submitting all my taxes as a part of my individual tax account. And because we're not producing more stuff and doing a lot of sales, it actually, I'm filling out the form on the losses on the business. So I'm not making a lot of money from this. Um, I joke with my wife about it. If I get really good at this, I might be a thousandaire someday. But that's how I did that. In terms of the ISBNs, Bowker, Bowker, I think it's Bowker Express. And if you do a search for that, they have a website. It's called Bowker.myidentifiers. And I don't know if it's .com after that right away. That is the place where you can buy ISBN numbers. You can buy an individual one. It's last I looked, an individual one is about $50. It's considerably cheaper if you buy a block of 10. You can buy a block of 100. I haven't done that. I'm not there yet, but no. And I will tell you that if any of you are producing something and you don't want to have your own publishing company, contact me. I have had a couple of other people approach me saying, I want to publish a book. Can I do this through Airway? the thing I'm going to ask is that you pay me for the ISBN, and I would assign it. I would be what they call your imprint, the publishing company, but then you have control of over the book. And I sell that at what my cost would be, which is cheaper than if you buy an individual one. So
Thank you
around
for that.
$25.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Question in here, how produce interdisciplinary content where single lesson might be, yeah. I try to look at things as transdisciplinary, trying to come up with tasks that students need to do where they have to incorporate geography, math, language arts, science in order to solve the problem. In my world of science teaching, it's easy to come up with examples like that. And I would suggest social studies is easy to do that with. One example that I did is with our giraffe book, I have a lesson published where students have to find out about the different species of and subspecies of giraffes. There's 9 of them. They use an app called iNaturalist to find out where they have been observed and put that onto a map to try to look for, is there overlap in the habitat? So they're doing geography, they're doing some science, they're collecting mathematical data, and then they have to communicate, okay, what does it mean that these 2 species overlap range, but none others do? And helping our students come up with how do we do lesson plans that way that's a whole nother lesson. It's more about educational design than it is about the publishing part. But all of our books have about 3 or 4 activities like that in the book. So that they read the book, then they can do the activities to do science. That's how I've incorporated these interdisciplinary ideas.
Yeah, thank you. But do you incentivize some content creators, or I see students do it as a part of the project, but when it comes to teachers, it's little
It is hard.
challenging.
It
Yeah.
is hard. For me, at first, I did actually pay some of the illustrators to do the early illustrations. And then we decided we're going to make it a class. And the university said, if they're getting class credit, you can't also pay them. Mm-hmm. So their incentive was course credit. So they would get a 3-credit class where what they did that semester was work as part of a team. Mm-hmm. For a lot of other groups, it's going to have to be a lot of people who have their personal motivation. I want to help create something for our school. Mm-hmm. Then if you start making some money, maybe you might have an agreement on how you're going to share revenues. But again, this is not a money-making project so much as it is a difference-making project.
It really is a passion project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're running over time here.
I see another hand for a question. I'm okay to stick with.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we'll do one more question. Go ahead, Ugonna.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining me beyond when we started. Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is, given that, we're struggling, we're trying to get kids to read and, of course, promote reading, but this is competing with screen time and shrinking attentive span. It's even for kids who can read back in the villages, you have technology. So everybody's eyes are fixated on screens. And you find that it increasingly is discouraging kids to do that. I don't know, given that you're in the field, how does one go about creating the kind of content that is engaging enough, to make children want to choose books over all the more instantaneous media? That's one. And then 2, I have tried to put my effort into creating books in Igbo, but my challenge and what discourages me sometimes is what comes first. Is it the readership or the book itself? Because you're creating, you even want to be sure that there are people there to read it. Because where do you direct your effort at first? Do you work towards having kids to be able to read text in Igbo, or do you just keep, generating the titles and hoping that something will happen later on? Thank you.
Those are two really good questions. In terms of the digital storytelling part, it is hard to get kids to read when they have a cell phone and they would rather look things up that way. In terms of what engages them, I spend time going out and looking at what are other people producing? What are the things that the students say they like to go look at? And in some cases, I've told students, my students in my classes, I require them to make a social media sized digital storytelling thing. Find a science concept, you choose to record it. So I've got one young man who does scuba diving. He teaches physics. He was talking about specific density and gravity and doing an experiment underwater in the swimming pool with a GoPro that his student held underwater to videotape him. And then he did voiceovers. He's choosing to do something he finds engaging. Sometimes I know some teachers who've told their students, go shoot some video and let's create something that you think is interesting. And we'll create the story and then share it with a broader audience. But my goal with those digital stories is not to teach the whole lesson. It's just to get them interested enough to say, well, what about this? Or what if I do that? Or where can I find something more about that? And then we can say, well, here's a book that's got this information in it. Or let's go look this up in a larger resource. I'm using the digital storytelling to try to engage the curiosity of students. And then we figure out what resources to go to. Okay. As far as what comes first, the story or the readers, our first book, I had no clue how it was going to go over. I got the idea by going into a bookstore in Florida and seeing children's books about wildlife and realizing they leave out the conservation story. I thought, I want to do this. So we created the book and we put it out there as sort of a pilot test to see we can produce the book, but then what? And we had to go to places where we could say, can we put this book on your shelf? Will you sell copies? Can we present this and share it with teachers or share it with Audubon Society? It was about birds. So I did presentations there and people started buying it. And then we said, okay, here's the next book. That first one, you're probably going to have to jump in and say, we're going to take a leap of faith. Dr. Beth mentioned it's a passion project. It's also a leap of faith where I have to say, I think this is going to work. Test it out. And then if it's working, then you can start building more stuff and revise how you're building to suit what your audience wants. So that leap of faith thing is very real. When I first jumped into this, I thought this could be an absolute flop. The next thing you know, I've got students banging on my door saying, when's your next book? I want to be on a team. And I've got teachers saying, what are you doing for your next book? So it can take off if you're targeting a need. So.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. McConnell. This has been just very inspiring and enlightening. And I hope that we can continue to have conversations and continue to talk about how we can learn from each other. And so on behalf of everyone in Multilingual Minds, I just want to say thank you very much.
Well, thank you for inviting me again. I appreciate it. I enjoy talking with all of you. You've got some really good questions, and I can tell there are ideas in the back of your minds for some of you that I want to do something like this. Yeah. If you have questions that I might be able to help with later on, my email is here. So
all right. You're just
helping to do more of this is my passion project now. So
yeah, we'll continue to work on this, and everyone enjoy your weekend, and come back. We're going to have another presentation in March, and we'll start promoting that soon. So just join the movement, right? Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
for the answers. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.